Welcome to the new episode of All That Jazz. I'm your host, Matyash, and I have with me Dr. Karen and Bryson. Welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me today.
Thank you for being on. And you are not only a podcaster, a professor, and an author, but just learned that you write screenplays, feature screenplays. Oh, let's go there because I do like movies, and particularly I like the 80s movies, and I feel like a lot of heart is missing from movies nowadays. They're cynical in some way, and they're okay. Here's somebody coming up. Okay, let's just continue on. Hold on, mama. So yeah. So what kind of features did you write?
I've written a large variety of different kinds of movies that I hope to be movies someday, scripts. So I'm the author of over 50 novels. So a number of them I have adapted from my own novels. And those would primarily be romance, romantic comedy in that genre. But I've also written horror, I've written thriller, I've written mystery and suspense. Science fiction. I have a co-writer that I write science fiction with. She and I have written a number of things together.
Right.
I've won and placed in screenwriting contests. I've also done TV pilots. My most recent TV pilot that I wrote is called Menopause Bites, and it's about a menopausal vampire hunter.
Wow.
So horror, that's more horror comedy.
Right.
I've written a lot of different things. I've also written for an animation. The Incredibly Awesome Adventures of Puggy Liddell was based on a graphic novel that I wrote for kids. And that I'm hoping someday someone will turn it into an animated script for kids, an animated movie for kids. So I have a wide variety. Biopics, I've written 3 biopics
Wow.
of different people.
And this is like biopics based on real people that you then
based on real people. Yeah. One was a female football coach, and she coached a junior high football team to a league championship.
Okay.
And it was an all-female football coaching staff. So they were coaching a predominantly male team, which was interesting.
Really?
At that time.
I would have thought this would have been picked up by now already.
I know. It's really hard. It's very competitive. So, I just tug along and get my stuff out there as much as I can, put them into screenwriting contests. Like I said, I've gotten a lot of recognition in screenwriting contests. I've actually had a script option by a production company, and I've sold another script to a production company.
Oh, so you've sold, but it's not been made yet.
Yeah, they've not been made yet. You got to get funding, and that takes time.
But what are those options like? Or did they probably pay all right?
They can be. It just depends on how much money the production company has to put forward, toward your project. So
right. Hey, and I imagine some of them are based on if the movie is made, then you make probably more, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so then up front they probably pay just a little change, and then if they make the movie, then they pay a lot more.
Exactly. Yep. You got it. That's how it works.
Yeah, I would have thought so because it makes more sense that way. But it also would feel good if something that you wrote would be made into a movie. Do you think it's like a lot of it is connection, or do you think it's just the material, the movies that are being made nowadays are different than what you're writing?
So yes, connections have a huge part of it. You need to be able to know people to pitch to. You have to have those opportunities for access to people who can make movies, to get movies made, if you're not the type of person who wants to make movies yourself. Because, there are men and women who are true filmmakers who write and direct and produce their own stuff. Kevin Smith, I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He's one example.
I wouldn't think you would know Kevin Smith. Yeah, no, I'm not a big fan of his work, but I do know him. He used to be really big guy, but I think he lost a lot of weight. He
Yeah.
looks very different, like a different person.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
sometimes I think with these people that they completely change. It's almost like they were endearing when they were before with the way they looked, and now they look like, whoa, this is somebody more serious. I don't know why. I don't know why.
I
Uh,
don't think his personality has changed to be more
yeah,
serious, but yeah.
yeah. So did you start writing really young? Like, because you obviously wrote a lot of books, like 50 books. So
Yeah. It's kind of a cliche. Like if I feel like every writer says, "Oh, I started writing when I was a kid and I always wanted to be a writer." I think every writer says that.
right.
So it's kind of a cliche, but I truly did start writing when I was very young, and I've
Mm.
been writing ever since. But as far as writing something that I felt was good enough for publication, probably has been in the last 10 to 15 years, really, that I've been serious about, getting stuff out there.
Well, what
And
does it mean serious? That you
with
have like invest more time into it, more editing?
everything, the first thing is getting the training that you need to really be a good writer, to invest the time that it takes. They say you have to put in 10,000 hours to be really
Yeah,
good at
yeah,
something. So
yeah.
investing that time, writing every day. We have a thing called National Novel Writing Month, and I don't know if you're familiar with what that is, but basically in November of every year, writers can join this contest
Mm.
that they challenge themselves to write a novel in a month. So in 2012, I decided I was going to join that contest. And so I did it. I wrote a novel in a month, and then I just continued doing that. And I did it for 3 years straight. So that ended up being 36 novels.
Wow, you caught the bug right there in 2012, and then the world didn't end in 2012, and you continued on writing.
Exactly. That's right.
Did you ever write a story about the world ending in 2012? In 2012,
No, back then I was on the opposite spectrum writing very sappy romance novels. So,
I mean,
definitely wasn't into the disaster stuff at that point, but
oh, but you did write the disaster later on.
I don't really like disaster type things necessarily. I do love
Okay.
dystopian though. Like after the disaster happens,
Right. Okay.
and the world's in a shambles. I love dystopian stuff, but the actual happening of the disaster kind of freaks me out.
Right.
Like disaster movies, I find terrifying. Those giant waves or the big meteors
Oh,
terrify me. So
maybe
yeah,
maybe it's a
I wouldn't go
past
toward the
life.
disaster, but the aftermath of, the world being destroyed and people surviving, Mad Max world, I love that.
Maybe Karen, you were in a past life. There was some happening, and you were involved in the French Revolution. Maybe it ended sadly, and you were like, no, I don't want to be a part of this anymore.
Right, exactly. That's right.
I want to return back to movies because I mentioned something earlier. Have you noticed with the movies, obviously, because I watched a lot of 80 movies, and they're very different than the 90s, and especially the 2010s movies, which are cynical in some way and disparaging to some people, and it's very different dialogue as well. What do you find is the reason for this? Is there a cultural change also in US? Because you experienced that from the 80s till now.
That's an excellent question. And we could probably dig a little deeper into
Mm,
that. But I feel like there were in the 80s a lot of feel good movies. And I noticed my husband and I will go back to watching those movies instead
yeah,
rather than watching new releases a lot of times, because we can't find things that we connect with on that emotional level, that we want to have that emotional experience. And it is difficult to find movies that make you feel good, and even if it's not necessarily a happy movie, but just give you that emotional experience that isn't depressing.
right,
um,
right.
yeah.
I think a lot
I,
of it is written. by millennials that are just cynical about the world, and they have connections in the industry, and they're whiz kids, and they write these what they think is amazing scripts, and but they're all sarcastic, cynical. A lot of them, not all, but a lot of them are that way. While in the 80s, you had like, even if you had a movie like Goonies, which was kind of scary, but it had a lot of heart. There
Yeah.
was genuine like romance. Well, if you can call it that, and then stuff like that, or Back to the Future. The Even the music back then was so much better. What is it
Look,
about
I
the?
love that. I love that you said movies with heart, because
Yeah,
that's the type of thing that I love to write. I love to write stories with heart. And that's definitely missing in a lot of what we see today. The other thing, too, that people are moving away from movies is what I call the Netflix syndrome, where people will watch streaming shows and their preferences for that long format.
yeah.
So they'll want to watch, like a Queen's Gambit type thing where it's, 6 or 7 or 8 episodes of a mini series or a
Mm-hmm.
limited series, and watch out for 8 hours rather than just watching a 90-minute movie. Their preferences for a longer format. Or get
Yeah,
into a show that's 5 years and sit there on a weekend and watch 5 years worth of a TV show rather than an hour and a half movie. So
yeah.
I think people are
It's a
doing
lot
that more too.
deeper. I mean, it's a lot more time. They don't want, because like movies, like you have to get. Um, it's almost like you're starting a long term relationship that's gonna end in a very short notice, while a series is like a long term relationship that's gonna last for at least a weekend. I think that's what it is. And even though a lot of people have short attention spans now, they also love to be distracted. So I think series provides that kind of thing. Like as far as movies with heart, I watched I've seen movies that have terrible writing, terrible acting, terrible production, but somehow they have heart, and I feel like that's their redeeming value. And then you have movies about Batman that have excellent everything, but they're lacking, like the newest Batman. Have you seen the what's his name? Christopher Nolan's Batmans. Have you seen
Yeah.
those?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're very kind of darkish and very like,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and Batman has such a really incredibly deep voice, and is so, the city is dark, the
Yeah. For me, Christopher Nolan's movies are about a half hour to 40 minutes too long. I feel like he just goes, and I found that with most of his movies, he goes a little bit too long. I feel like they should end and then they keep going for another 40 minutes.
yeah. I would say his best movie is probably Interstellar. Have you seen that? They go into space and there's a
Yeah.
black hole and all that. Yeah, Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
All right. So, how did you then go into the profession of being a professor?
Wow. That's a long question.
Yes.
So, originally, when I was a young person, I got my master's degree in mental health counseling with the intention of being a mental health counselor.
Mm.
And when I actually went into the profession, I found it extremely emotionally challenging and difficult
Ooh.
for the type of person that I am. And I just met up with a lot of people who were so broken, and there was nothing I could really do to fix them. And it was demoralizing in a way. And I started to feel like I was getting a skewed view of the world. I thought you feel like every person you meet on the street then has some kind of emotional trauma,
They
that.
probably do.
But
But
I
they
don't
hide
want
it.
I don't want to be that be the forefront in my mind,
Yeah.
oh, what's their emotional trauma? Were they molested? Because the situation where I was working, it was like 6 or 7 people a day. I would be dealing with people who had trauma from being molested. I was like, was everyone molested? It just got to be too overwhelming emotionally for me. So I wondered what other things could I do, with as a profession. So I actually started working at a university as an advisor, like an academic advisor. And I loved that. I loved the university setting. And so that just led to me thinking to myself, I've always loved school. I've always loved academics. If I could study and do research and read all day, it would be the ideal profession.
Yeah.
So I said, why not? Why not be a professor? I could spend the rest of my life at a university.
I mean, that's
so
it.
I started on that pathway. I was, how old? 26, I think, at that point, when I said to myself, I'm going to start, toward a degree to getting a PhD. Now, it was a little different. If I would have gone right out of, so I was 21 when I finished my bachelor's degree and 23 when I got my first master's degree. And then I worked for a few years, as I said, in the mental health profession. And then I started working at the university and decided to go back to school. So from that point, because I was working full time and going to school, it took longer than it would have if I was just going to school. So
right.
It took about a decade for me to finish my doctorate. Which was
so you have a PhD in psychology?
I have a PhD in human science.
Okay, human science. Wow. Okay, what is that? Sounds very interesting.
It's a more broad-based degree, although I took a lot of psychology classes, and I'm actually a professor of psychology and human services. So it's a more broad degree. My undergraduate degrees were in psychology and social services, so I've always had that more wide spectrum of it being, so it encapsulates psychology with human services, social services, and also sociology, anthropology, those areas. So it's a more broad degree, which is excellent for me because at the school where I teach, I predominantly teach liberal arts classes. Right. So, we were talking at our last meeting about some of the classes that I teach, which are more general liberal arts classes.
Right.
So I work with our students when they first come in. I teach a class called Writing and Critical Thinking to prepare them to be able to write and do critical thinking at a university level. So that class really prepares them to do that, and also to immerse them in the liberal arts, to give them an understanding of what the liberal arts are and why they're important. And then the last class that I teach when they're getting ready to graduate is called Global Issues in the Liberal Arts. And that's a class that really helps them to see what they learned and their education, and also themselves in the world as a citizen of the global world.
Yeah. I feel like in some ways, this is my crazy idea, but I feel like in some ways that some people would be well served if they went to North Korea for a month and lived like the North Koreans, and because it would just show the freedoms that we enjoy, not only in America but all across the West, is such a great gift. That in North Korea they have one channel, and that only operates, I think, a few hours every day, and it's just propaganda, and then you eat the same stuff, you're probably malnourished, and if you live out in the village, you don't even have a washing machine, it's crazy,
Yeah, it does give you an appreciation. Travel definitely gives you an appreciation of situation where you're in, being in a highly industrialized, like we are in the US, and highly industrialized Western country.
Right. How's critical thinking with students? How do you generally find them to be with that?
It's difficult so I started teaching 16 years ago at the university. So I've been a professor now for 16 years. And even in that 16-year period of time, I've seen a drop in people's ability to think critically.
Like
And
every year.
yeah, and I feel like it's in direct proportion to the rise of social media. So people don't necessarily, well, who reads a newspaper anymore? People don't even get their news. A lot of people don't get their news from what I would call reputable news sources. They get their news on Twitter and Facebook. And
Yeah.
they're, and how do they distinguish between what's real and what's something that somebody made up and is, you know, spreading like it's actual news? They don't look further than the headline. They don't investigate. They don't look to see who wrote it. Are they an expert in the field? You know, is this something that's biased for a certain reason in a certain way for a certain cause?
Right. Well, I would say I haven't really read much. I read books, but I don't read much newspapers for some reason because I feel like either they're biased one way or another. And
That's why it's a good idea to read a variety of sources, right?
right.
So if you feel like I'm not as familiar with the newspapers where you are in the UK as I should be, but here in the United States, you know, we have left-leaning papers and right-leaning papers. So, you know, take one from one side and one from the other side and get a foreign source and look at those three and, you know, take one example of one thing that happened that week, look at the right-leaning source, look at the left-leaning source, look at a foreign source.
Right.
And then from those three articles of that same incident, you know, you can get a good idea after reading three different sources from three different points of view, maybe what was the truth in that.
Okay, so is that what you do? You read, let's say you read New York Times and then you read the Wall Street Journal and then something else?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Look at Al Jazeera. If you want something that's a different point of view, look at something that Al Jazeera put out. You know, look at something from the UK or from Canada or, you know, another point of view, another perspective, another country or culture. What are they saying? It's great to look at, especially for US news, to look at the
foreign ones,
how it's being reported from the foreign press.
Oh yeah.
Because it's a completely different perspective of those incidents than we get in our country.
Yeah. Do you think there is since we're going down this path, let's go fully down. Do you think what do you think about fake news? I think there is such a thing as fake news based on fake, meaning that they come with intentional bias that justifies any means to its end. So they will invent sources and things like that.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And people have been using social media to spread false information. The term fake news is really a bad term because of the way it's been used. It's been weaponized in our country. So what is true and what is false? What could be objectively proven? What do we know, you know, is the rational perspective and the rational point of view, right? Yeah, I mean,
very hard.
We can prove that there was not a pizza place in Washington, D.C. where Hillary Clinton was murdering babies or whatever the propaganda was that particular point of view was spreading.
So there wasn't a pizza place, even though they mentioned pizza in the emails.
There was a pizza place. There's no basement there. So yeah, what they were saying about babies being murdered in the basement can objectively be proven that it's not true because that place does not have a basement.
Okay.
So you can do some investigation, and if you see something that you think, okay, this doesn't look like it makes a lot of sense. Is this real? Is this true? We can objectively say, no, it's not true.
Yeah, but then people will say, I had a guest on that would disagree with you, and they would say, you know, they're obviously they're not gonna tell you that this is gonna appear to be like that, but actually they're hiding it. They're hiding it. There's always it's a hidden thing, you know.
Okay.
Well, it's, yeah, this is a, because then you get into a belief system about, and then you go on faith. Do I trust this paper, or do I, because then, it all goes back to polarization and bias. They will say Washington Post is covering for Hillary and New York Times covering for Hillary, and all the rest. Um, the liberals will discount anyway, so they will not believe them, but they will believe the Washington Post, and vice versa. So you have this intense strife. I think it's gotten worse, the political discourse, since I've
Well,
been
it's on
following
both
it.
sides, though. So, I mean,
Yeah.
you're going to have propaganda on either side. So, you as an individual, it's interesting because, and this is just my perception of, in general, of the United States. So, we have extreme polarization between the liberals and the conservatives, right? And it's a chasm that may never be able to come together again, right? It's just deeply divided.
Mm.
Um, but there's propaganda on both sides of the spectrum, and a lot of people see it as a line with conservatives on one side and liberals on the other, but it's actually a circle, right?
Mm.
Because extremes on both sides will meet at the other end.
Right. Yeah.
When you go to an extreme of either side, you're not on polar opposites. You're actually meeting at the bottom. You're extremists. Either side becomes an extremist.
This kind of reminds me.
Most people in our country are in the middle. The majority of people are just like, I want to live my life. I want to have a good salary. I want to have a
Yeah.
house and be able to raise my kids. Really,
Yeah.
that's the majority of people. They don't, as long as those things are happening and they feel okay about, if I call and need the police, are coming. If my house is on fire, the fire department's coming. They just want basic, simple things. They want to be able to go and have a pizza on Friday night and have a beer, or, go to the local restaurant on Saturday and go out to eat with their friends. Simple pleasures of life is what most people want, right?
Right.
But it's getting caught up in this. Both sides use it, the emotional extremism, to really rile people up so that they think that the other side is going to get them and is after them. And, which isn't true. Most people are average. The average American wants the same things, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican. They want the same thing. They want to raise their kids. They want to have grandkids. They want to, have a nice life in the suburbs or, in the city, wherever they choose to live.
But then there's a 20% or so, or maybe 10% of the vocal minority, maybe from both sides, that want power. They're not satisfied. They want power. They want the power to dictate how other people live their lives. Some of
That's
them.
the problem. That's the problem. Yeah.
So I guessing you're kind of on the independent side here.
I've never been registered. Oddly, I've never been registered.
To vote.
I've been voting since I was 18, but I've always been registered as an independent. I've never been affiliated with either party.
Can I ask, were you able to vote in the 80s?
Yeah. I'm ancient.
What you didn't? What was that guy that was running against Reagan the second time?
Dukakis?
Did you vote for Dukakis?
Do I have to answer that question?
Okay, let's move on.
Put it this way, I wasn't necessarily a fan of Reaganomics.
You weren't a fan of Reaganomics?
Yeah. Of course, I was 18 at that time, so
Okay.
I was in college and a rebel, but
yeah. Right. Yeah. I happen to really like Reagan. I think he was also I think another thing I really liked about him is the sense of optimism that he brought. I think that's kind of important in a figure, like in a leader figure, to have that optimism. Like that's, I think that's typical of the 80s, to have the kind of the heart that's missing a lot of times nowadays, to have the heart of positive vision, um, and jokes. He used to collect Soviet jokes. I love that. he would
That's funny.
he would use Soviet jokes in his speeches sometimes, like actual jokes that he would collect from the Russian people. You know.
That's well, it's interesting because you said you were born in 85.
Yeah, yeah. I was born in
So you actually
Yugoslavia.
were born in the Soviet
No,
Union.
no, no. I was born in Yugoslavia, which was separate communist thing. It wasn't as
Okay.
intense as Soviet Union, but
So it was like Soviet Union light.
in a way, we had our camps, but it wasn't nearly as intense
Okay.
as Soviet Union. You
Okay.
know, like the joke says, there were two people talking in Russia, and one asked the other, "Do you think this is full communism? Do you think we reached it?" And the other guy is like, "No, things are gonna get a lot worse." So and that's basically not communism in a nutshell, I think. But let's move on to something um, critical. You mentioned critical thinking skills. What do you think the comparison between critical thinking and critical theory that's pretty prevalent nowadays in universities and colleges?
I don't know.
You don't know. Oh,
No.
you don't teach stuff, I guess, that's influenced by critical theory.
No.
Okay, okay, probably good for you then.
Well, tell me what it is. Tell me the theory.
Well, they're basically cynical theories. Like, for example, one of the out branches of critical theory would say, let's say you have it has to do a lot with race and stuff. We had to read in my university. We had to read a book called "Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race," and it was kind of sad because in the book it said that, to paraphrase, that white people are racist even if they don't think they are, which I thought was kind of inexcusable. But I'll give you an example of the cynical theory syndrome. That's because it's all based on interpretation. And so let's say two people walk into a store and one is white and one is black. So I put forth to you, who would you go to first? Who would you attend to?
If I was a clerk, you mean?
Yeah.
It took, well, if two people walked in the exact same time, I mean, I would serve the person who walked in first.
Okay. But what if you have to make a decision? Let's say,
I honestly, I
just
would
for the
probably
sake
go.
of just for the sake of
It'll probably sound bad, but I would probably serve whoever was female first and then serve the male.
okay.
I do have a bias. Honestly, I would
Okay,
probably
what
tend
if
toward the female first.
they're both females? One is white, one is black.
I don't know. Whoever looked like they were the most anxious, I guess. I don't
Okay.
know.
So okay, so the way it goes, if you pick the white person, then the theory would, go revert to, you're racist because you went to the white person first. But if you chose the black person, they would say, oh, you didn't trust the black person, that they would, you thought they might steal something or something. So you might still be a racist choice. So here's the cynicism, like anything you choose could be interpreted in a way as cynical, as as a bad thing. So I don't think that's critical thinking. I think that's muddled thinking in a way. So I don't know, it's getting so intensely politicized. I just want to go to university and learn about classics and all that, and now they're badgering me with politics. I'm like, I'm doing theater, stop me. Stop with this.
Yeah, but theater can be very
Oh
political.
yeah, I've realized that there's a lot of,
Throughout time,
right.
that was a primary way to spread, well, political propaganda on one hand, depending on the place and time, but also to express political ideology or political ideas that maybe you couldn't express in other ways. Theater has been used politically for, yeah, theater isn't going to get you out of politics, sorry.
Well, economics is also a little bit political,
Economics is very political.
and Krugman wrote the textbook, so obviously, and he writes for the New York Times. Um, yeah, well, speaking of theater, where would you say the theater has been very successful in changing the populace opinion on
Oh,
something?
wow. Well, one example in the US, of course, Rent. I don't know how familiar you are with that show, but that certainly was part of the thing. The whole culture around Rent, the show, helped us to greater acceptance of GLBTQ plus
Okay, Rent.
community.
That's interesting. So this is a recent thing.
Rent isn't that recent.
Like in the last 10 years?
What year Rent was out? Definitely not in the last 10 years. No, Rent was out late 90s, early 2000s, I think.
Okay. But okay, what criticism I put forth, this is actually for my one of my presentations is like, well, how many people actually see the show? And if they see the show, then they'd have to also, because not is this a show is not a lecture, so usually you don't explicitly say what your message is. It's implied, so you have to also get the message, and then furthermore at the end there has to be like you have to also change your opinion or take an action. So these three filters would leave very small percentage of people, in my opinion, and that's what I put the forth on the professor, and then and yeah, was kind of received. Oh, why am I doing theater if it can't cause change? She was a bit like, I don't know, almost taken aback, like.
It's a great point, though,
Yeah,
and something that you have to consider when you consider theater, especially today. I don't know what it's like where you are, but definitely in the United States, you have to be of a certain socioeconomic level to be able to afford to go to see a theater production.
really,
So
like,
yeah, a significant portion of the population may not be able to see at least the most recent shows. Of course, there's trickle down. So there's a
yeah,
point in time at which a high school will be able to do a show, right? Because the royalties are inexpensive enough where then it's more accessible to the majority of the population. If high schools can afford to do a certain show,
right.
and anyone can go see it at that point. But that
Well,
takes time.
because I'm in UK. I once when I went to London, I paid like, I'm poor, but at that time I was like, I just want to see a show like in a good theater. So I paid like $90 to see a show with Damian Lewis. That's an actor that was in Band of Brothers. I don't know if you saw that series, and he was amazing. Didn't go off the stage once in 2 hours. Wow, it was impressive. And yeah, but I was sitting next to a lady that was she was like my age, and she looked like like what they would call really upper class in England. She was like training to be a doctor, and I was there, coming from Scotland, living in a hostel. So completely different classes of people. Maybe that's more normal in UK. I don't know. I guess in US, less people attend theater. I don't think it's such a big thing.
Well, a lot of people attend theater, but it's expensive. It's not the cost is high. Even so we have like Broadway, obviously,
Right.
a show will start on Broadway, for example. And then the tickets are extremely expensive and very limited because, only so many people can go to a show per night
Right.
in a Broadway theater. But then they go on tour, what is called a touring company. So then that same show will take a cast and go out throughout the country. And those shows are a little bit more a little bit less expensive, but they're still not cheap.
Like, are we talking like $150 or more?
Yeah, well, $100. Yeah,
That's what people pay to see an NBA game. If they really wanted to, they could go.
Well, I don't have any comment about sports because
Oh,
we could do a whole nother podcast show about my opinion about sports. But yeah, I don't even know the cost of what a sporting event would be.
well, I once went to years ago. I went to Los Angeles and I paid $150, and it wasn't even a great seat. I was in the middle, like I was quite far away from the action, you know.
Well, and music concerts are extremely expensive too. Just to give you an example, to see Fleetwood Mac was $300 per ticket.
Yeah, well, I think it's interest as well. I think more people are interested in seeing. I don't know. And back in the day, it was Backstreet Boys, and now it's you know, Ariana or whatever, or who I don't know. I can even think who people are listening to right now. Rihanna.
I don't know. I got Pearl Jam tickets. I was waiting for like 25 years to see
Pearl
Pearl Jam.
Jam. Wow.
And I finally got Pearl Jam tickets, and the pandemic happened, and I didn't get to see Pearl Jam after waiting 25 years to get tickets.
But it was more than $300.
It was very expensive, and I had to buy, well, I didn't have to. We chose to buy two, one for me and one for my husband. And it got canceled because of the pandemic. So I still haven't seen Pearl Jam.
Have you seen any bands in the 80s? The 80s was a good time. Have you seen Simple Minds or anything like that?
Oh, are you kidding me? You name a band in the 80s and I saw them. I was in high school and college in the 80s. I saw every band. I saw a number of them twice.
Simple Band is from Scotland, if I'm not mistaken. And
Simple Minds are awesome in concert.
They were awesome?
Yeah. They were from Scotland. They were awesome.
So
yeah.
who was the best from what, you know, experience?
Oh my God. Two that I can name off the top of my head: Peter Gabriel, phenomenal. David Bowie.
Oh yeah.
Phenomenal. David Bowie.
Right.
Awesome. Depeche Mode I saw twice. The Cure. I mean, you name the band. I saw a lot of bands.
Right.
In the 80s. Yeah. I mean, we were kids, and back then the tickets weren't that expensive. And we were really close, like where I went to college, halfway between St. Louis and Chicago. So we would just drive down St. Louis, drive up to Chicago. It was no, you know, when you're a kid, it's no big deal.
You know, was Chicago a safer city in the 80s than it is now?
I was in 18, 19, 20, 21. I just walked around. I did not feel any fear at all in Chicago. I don't know what it's like today because I live in Arizona now, so I'm not familiar with that part of the country as much as I was back then. I didn't feel uncomfortable. Of course, you know, when you're 20, you don't feel like you're gonna die either, ever.
Right. I think it's that part of when you're young, you feel like you're not ever going to grow old. In a way, you feel invincible.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
you're not really in touch with your mortality at that point.
unless you get crippled or something, then you really get, or you get into an accident.
Yeah. I actually was in a really bad car accident when I was, God, how old was I? 21? Between 20 and 21. Yeah. The other guy died.
The other girl died.
The man who was driving the other car died. Yeah.
Oh man. Highway, I imagine.
Decapitated.
He was decapitated. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was horrifying. Yeah, I broke my back. I fractured my L3 vertebrae.
How long did that take to heal?
About 4 or 5 months.
Okay. Man, the bodies are resilient. Unless you get decapitated, then it's
Yeah, I know. It was horrifying.
Did you see the aftermath of?
Fortunately, I did not see it. because I was being whisked away myself.
Yeah.
In the ambulance.
But I can't imagine people in wars and stuff. They see horrible things, even as children. I don't, and what you were saying earlier about therapy and seeing people that are living in inner chaos. I would say that's. I said one of my former guests, Theodore Dalrymple, he had to start writing because the things he was seeing was so awful that he found bottles of alcohol from the former guy that was working there because that's how the former guy coped with it. He was drinking.
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
Yeah, and that's a primary reason why people write is to deal with their own trauma, to deal with their pain, to figure out life.
Yeah.
Most people write for themselves first, and then to entertain or educate or inspire others.
Right. Is that your reason for writing? Is like almost like you can't not write? You have to write?
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of writers have that feeling. And sometimes it wakes me up. Well, not sometimes, a lot of times
Wakes you
it
up.
wakes me up and I just jump out of bed and start writing because it's there.
It's the muse that
Yeah,
comes.
it's just there. It's like I equate it to a faucet. And most of the time it's just drip, 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 which is manageable, right? When it comes out, drip, 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 drip. Then you have a normal life, and then you write in the morning or whenever your writing period is, and then you live. And it's just that, in the back of your mind, the drip, drip, drip. But sometimes the faucet gets turned on and it comes out like a spray. And then it has to all come out. And those are the periods of time. And I know a lot of people experience this, not just me who are writers, where you'll write an entire feature-length screenplay in 2 or 3 days, or you'll write an entire novel in a week because it's just there and it pours out like a faucet.
Yeah. I heard that Sylvester Stallone wrote Rocky in 3 days.
Yeah, because it's just there. It has to come out.
That's so impressive. And I think people don't give him really the credit because he the way he looks, or maybe because he's an actor. So they're like, but he's an excellent writer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that was an iconic. It still is an iconic movie.
So you like action movies as well?
Oh, I love action movies.
So I imagine your
like
favorites
John
were.
Wick. I can't even
Oh,
tell you
wow.
how many times I've watched John Wick. I love revenge movies.
The Terminator 2?
Yeah, I like the Terminator, but I prefer like a real action hero, like
Adventure kind of action, like.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Indiana
feel like
Jones?
John Wick 1 was the perfect movie to me in so many
Really?
ways. Love it. Love that movie. Yeah.
I think I've seen it once, but it was kind of okay. I think it was about his dog. They killed his dog, and he would,
Yeah.
yeah. But Keanu is such an iconic actor. I think it has to do with, what? It's not just acting. It's the character of the person. So, I think the perfect example of that is Jack Nicholson, because the base of his character is already flamboyant. So for a role, he can turn it up or turn it down, and
Yeah.
because you're always working with you're the instrument in acting. And do you
Like I
find
love Jason Statham. You
hmm,
can't keep me away from him. You cannot keep me away from him. If he
because
has a movie, I'm there.
because of testosterone, the way he looks, or the
I
action,
just
or the
love
accent?
everything about him, and I love the movies that he chooses to do. I like the emotional experience. Like there's a movie he did called Parker. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Love that movie. I've seen that probably 30 times.
Really?
Love that movie. I just love that emotional experience of what he goes through in that movie.
Something else I wanted to ask you about the 80s. You probably know about this. There was a lot of, or ironically, there was a movie with Jack Nicholson. I've never seen it, but I heard it's credited for uh, something that I'll mention next. There was the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or something. the
Yeah.
and books about that made it seem like people were doctors and psychiatrists were abusing people in state hospitals. And then in the 80s, unfortunately, they released a lot of these mentally ill people on the streets. Um, and I think it's still, America has still not recovered from that, in my opinion.
That's a whole nother discussion about
Mhm.
deinstitutionalization. Yeah. So there are two different issues. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest as the story, and deinstitutionalization, yeah, as a whole separate idea. But insofar as, yes, that did happen to people in mental institutions. They were tortured and abused. And that's well documented. That happened a lot.
Well, are you referring to the shock therapy and all that they used to use back in the day? Or
Yes. And but also giving people lobotomies, which happened in one. I don't. You didn't see One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
no, I'm kind of scared to
Yeah.
watch it.
Well, I don't want to give it away if anyone hasn't watched
Okay.
it, but yeah, there is a part of that where it includes a lobotomy too. So, um,
But at the same time, like, okay, yeah, methods were crude, but then they were, um, I think it wasn't like it's a thing where I don't think they were intentionally trying to hurt people. It's just that their methods were so crude back then compared to where we are now as far as
well,
dealing with
that, yeah,
patients.
those are two different issues. So
Yeah,
yes, we didn't know as much then, so we were using methods that were crude.
yeah.
True, but also yes, there are a lot of documented cases of people actually being emotionally and physically abused.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
taken advantage of sexually,
oh,
molested.
mhm.
Yeah, many types of abuse, and those are documented as well. So both sides of the coin.
Right,
Well,
but if we take that and put it to Catholic Church, and that would be the equivalent of like having the churches taken down and all that because of 4% of priests are abusing, or 2% or whatever it is. So you can always find anecdotal cases wherever there's a big quantity of people in an institution, but I feel like I think the important thing is, in general, is this helping the mentally ill people, or would they be better served if they were on the
so
streets?
so the reason why the movement was toward the okay,
Oh,
the
yeah.
the reason why there was a movement toward deinstitutionalization was to have a more humane treatment, and what they had in mind, the goal was, what's the least restrictive environment that someone could be in. So for example, if someone is schizophrenic but they're being controlled with medication, what's the least restrictive environment could they be in? Could they live in a group home rather than an institution? Could they live with family members rather than being in an institution? So what can we do to help them to be out into the community, be functioning member of society, but still be able to have the services that they need to help them with their mental issues?
Hmm.
But the problem came in. So in theory, that's an excellent idea, right? We don't want to have people in a more restricted environment that they need to be in. We want people to be able to be in the community and to re-enter society. But the problem comes in where if the services aren't there to support them at all. So
Right.
yeah, if we're putting people out into the society,
Out in the
and maybe there aren't
streets in
any
some
group homes,
cases.
and they don't have relatives, and then they're out in the street because they don't have an
Hmm.
institution, and they don't have any support services, and they have nothing, so then they're homeless in the street.
Right. Well, I've read some psychiatrists that said that used to treat people in state hospitals, and he's passed away since, obviously, because this was a while ago. But he said that back in the day when there were state hospitals, that he never saw a patient that he didn't think deserved to be there. All had problems, mental or otherwise, severe, and they all needed to be there for their safety or the safety of others. If some of them, if they take them off the medications, they become violent or whatever, and or a lot of them wouldn't be able to take care of themselves. Um, I do think this is an important issue that a lot of people don't know about. So I don't know. This
Well,
is the
and
first
also
time I
you have
brought it up.
yeah, and the other issue too that you that alluded to is medication compliance. So
Mm,
you unless they're court ordered, you can't force someone to continue with their medication. And there are a number of situations in which people who have a mental illness are prescribed a medication that will keep their symptoms under control, and then they choose to not continue with taking the medication because of the side effects, for example.
right.
So when they choose to take themselves off the medication, then that's when they will start having those symptoms again and may not be able to function as well as they can in society being on the medication.
What about the issue of how do they deal with forced institutionalization? Is that something that was taken more or less off the table in the 80s as well?
No, no.
No?
There are people who are court ordered to be in a institution. I mean, they don't stay as long as stays in mental institutions have been greatly reduced. So right. you may not have if a person is in danger to themselves or others, a law enforcement officer can require them to be put in an institution. I mean, it's a law that a police officer, for example, can
Yeah, but a
determine
police officer won't be able to, they're not trained. They can't go on the street and be like, this homeless person, he's schizophrenic and he's potentially a danger. Well, how would they know? Like,
so there are certain situations in which you know, like for example,
right.
when I was a mental health counselor, as I told you in the beginning of my career, I worked at a place where we did mental health counseling, and a man walked into the building. He sat down across from me and he said, I have a gun in my car. My plan is to leave your office and shoot myself in the parking lot with the gun that's in my car.
Oh my God.
And I said, excuse me for just a moment. I went to my boss. I repeated that. My boss said, let me call the police. I went back to my office and I said, tell me a little bit about what's going on. We waited for the police to come. The man said he had a gun. He was going to use it. He was going to shoot himself. So in that case, a police officer came and took him to the mental hospital because it was a danger to himself. He said he was going to kill himself. So but yeah, there are obvious situations where something like that can be determined.
No, but yeah, I believe that. But if a police officer would see somebody in the street, it's almost, and they're behaving normally at the time, or forcing themselves to be kind of normal. I would think it's almost impossible to tell, is this person all right, or if
they couldn't.
It's very hard. And I think police officers nowadays, they've been I think the respect towards the police has been very much downgraded since last summer, unfortunately. Like,
I mean, that's a tough job. So think about this. From everything that the United States has gone through, right? Since the start of the pandemic, at the same time, we had all of those issues with all of the,
BLM
riots,
and all that. Yeah.
Everything you could think of happened in our country. It all came together. Who, as a young person today, say you're a 25-year-old, would you say, oh yeah, I really think that I want to be a police officer now, after seeing all that and knowing that you're going to put your life on the line? You're not sure, you're not, every day the police have to make a decision, me or them, that person who's doing whatever they're doing. You get called, right? Because something's happening. You respond to the call. You're not sure. You have to make a split-second decision. It's me or that person. Does that person have a gun? Is that gun pointed at me? Who wants to be in that situation? And damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you make the wrong decision, your life is probably over. I don't know what kind of a person would want to have that responsibility. I certainly wouldn't. It would be it's a difficult job to begin with. And now it's made even worse. It's amplified the difficulty of that position, of that job.
Right. And anything, if you're a white police officer and, if you harm a black or non-person anyway, you might be, and not only, or you might be fired, but your reputation for your whole life might be stained because there will be political implications, this and that. It's, um, and then there was a whole, I think there was very popular last year, the movement against the defunding the police as well. But that was
That
also from
was
the
a that
fringes.
was a very bad way to phrase it. Defund the police was not a good way to say what I feel like they were trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good idea to say police officers need to respond when there is a person in danger or a crime. The things that we imagine that police officers are there to do.
Yeah.
What we don't want them to have to do is be in situations, as you were talking about, where they're not trained to respond. So we don't want them to necessarily go into a situation, for example, where a young boy, 13 or 14-year-old boy, is autistic, and the parents are having issues with behavior control and behavior management. They call the police to help them. A police officer isn't trained to deal with someone who's autistic, and they may use a means to control that person, that teenager, that's not appropriate because they don't know how to handle someone who's autistic.
Right. But
Someone
depends
with
what the kid is doing. If he's holding a knife towards his parents, or it's but you have like these cops that they come and they have to make a split decision based on what they see. They don't know the context, anything, and I
But it
think
would be nice for
yeah,
us to have a different set of people that could respond to other types of things that we don't necessarily need the police to respond to. Have people that can come in. We have a situation with someone who's mentally ill, or someone who is a person with autism, or even domestic disputes. You may not
well,
necessarily need to have a police officer, depending on
but
the level of the
but Karen,
dispute.
how is anybody on the street gonna know if somebody is in an
Not
altercation
necessarily a
with
person on the
somebody?
street, but the person who's making the call. So if you're in a situation where
Right.
you're do you want your son shot? No, but you want help in controlling his behavior. So call someone who's trained in that area rather than a police officer. I don't know. I'm just
Right.
throwing that out there. I think that was the impression that I got. Not necessarily defund the police. We need
Well,
police officers. Who doesn't not want to have a police
mm,
officer if you're being robbed or,
I I don't think that was misstating. I think some of them actually tried to disband the police. There was actually, but some of
well,
them wanted to put social workers. There's the other side of it as well, obviously. But it's either way. I think it sets a bad
I mean,
precedent.
it takes common sense.
Yeah.
Let's have some common sense. If a bank is being robbed, you don't want to send a social worker in there.
No.
I want someone with a gun who's going to deal with a bank robber, right?
Right.
You want someone who's trained in an emergency situation. I want a police officer to deal with that. I don't want somebody from the general public to deal with that. But yeah, in the situation with the teenager with autism, maybe we don't need a police officer for that type of a thing. I just think
What if a person with autism is with a gun in a bank and nobody knows that person is autistic? No, but I'm
I'm
saying,
sure there
and
have been many bank robbers who are people with autism.
right, but the point is, people will not know. People only know what the person is doing, what it appears, and what it is the person with a gun. So you need the police. I think. I don't know how I have to say my faith is so low in social workers at de-escalating violent situation that it's less than 0.1% in my opinion. That's just me. Maybe I'm cynical, but I just don't see it.
Well, if a person's appropriately trained, the problem may be that we're not appropriately. You could take a person, okay, say you have someone who they have an option to go to the police academy or go to another kind of academy where we're training people to respond
Mm,
to crisis situations, but not necessarily with guns. So they
right.
have They may have all the training that they need to deal with a crisis situation that isn't necessarily going to end in violence with a gun, because there are situations, you know, that aren't to that level.
Yeah, and then yeah, sometimes it does seem it escalates too quickly, and yeah, I mean, in some ways, the British police is the other extreme. They try to talk more, you know, try to de-escalate more, um, and they're more using more of a soft approach, and sometimes that works. But I imagine in a country with the Second Amendment, that's a bit different because you're dealing with potentially you're dead. You know, you're using a soft approach, and then that would fail because the person would drop their gun. So I think the context in US is different. So
Well, that's what I'm saying. Who would want the job of pulling over? So you're a highway patrol person and
yeah,
you're pulling over cars. Every time you pull over someone, you're in that situation. Is that person going to shoot me? Every single time. There's
every
no
single
way in the
time.
United States for you to be able to tell necessarily.
Oh,
People would know I have a gun because mine is registered, but how would you know if someone had a gun? Maybe if they, you know, I went through
yeah,
training.
you can
You
buy
know,
it,
I have a concealed carry license,
right?
so people know that I have a gun. But there are plenty of people who don't go through that training, who don't get concealed carry license, maybe not even have a registered gun.
Yeah, but isn't that legal to have just a gun, buy a gun off somebody in some states and just
You
have a
can do
gun?
a private, yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. You can
yeah.
do a private sale from, it was shocking to me when I learned that in the United States, in a lot of states, the rules are state by state, but yeah, you can go to a gun show, or you can go, I can walk out and sell my gun to my neighbor.
Mm. Do you know that show, King of the Hill, the animated show?
I know what it is. I
Uh,
haven't watched it though.
I love it. I like it's so because it's set in Texas. So just to set the scenario, in one episode, the wife was selling books and nobody was buying books. She thought she was gonna make, she was you know she this is gonna fulfill her purpose and she's gonna make money doing this. She was making no money. Nobody was coming in, and then the neighbor had guns, and then she got the bright idea, well, you know, have the neighbor in there, he would be selling guns, and sooner or later, soon the store was just selling mostly guns. And then the inspector came, and then they came with the idea, yeah, these people are buying books and they just get complimentary gun. And then the inspector was like, okay. So so then a lot of people would be buying guns, but just take the compulsory book that was just there, and you know. And, but yeah, it's funny because like I think maybe especially in Texas that there is an interest in guns and all that. So yeah, okay, let's talk lastly about books, because this is very important. I feel like the classics and the great books of the Western world have been, the interest in them have been on decline for a long time. And you have a theory about this.
Yeah. I have a lot of theories.
Right.
So I feel like people have much shorter attention spans.
Mm,
Um, People are reading less. The things they read, they want to be shorter, quicker, bite-sized pieces of information. People like watching YouTube videos to learn information more than they like reading to find
yeah.
out information. You know, if you can watch a 5 or 10 minute video on YouTube, then you don't have to read a book about it. They want the
Right.
shortened version. Is there a cliff note for that? Do I have to read the whole book? Can you give me a synopsis of it instead?
Right. Well, yeah, that's the our generation in a nutshell. We want things, we want it fast.
Well, and we've had as an online instructor, and also someone who builds curriculum, we've had to make it so that people have different experiences online every 15, 20, 30 minutes. So they have a short article to read, then a video, then another short article, then an exercise, to keep people engaged and stimulated, because they don't want to sit there for 2 or 3 hours reading a few chapters from a textbook. You know, they want different types of information presented in different ways, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like, it stimulates different parts of the brain, and it's good for different types of learners, because not everybody learns from, you know, reading written information. So some people do learn better from watching a video or hearing something, you know, or engaging in an exercise. We have people actually going out and doing experiencing things and then writing a reflective paper on those experiences, because people learn by doing things too.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but yeah, the classics, classic literature has definitely been neglected. I don't think people are even reading contemporary books as much.
Right. So the reading overall is on the down, and texting is way up, and watching. I mean, now it's like first it was YouTube, and now it's like TikTok, just 1 minute maximum.
They're getting shorter. They have Instagram Reels, and it's like you can't get over 30 seconds. Wow, that's short. They're 15 seconds or 30 seconds. That's your maximum. You have to get your message.
I'm not on TikTok. I thought it was 1 minute. It's even less. Wow.
Oh, Instagram, the Instagram Reels. Instagram Reels are 15 or 30 seconds long. So that's your maximum. Yeah. Yeah. Your message in 30 seconds.
Do you think the culture in the West in general is on decline?
Oh, yeah.
There's no hesitation.
Is that a question? Is that really a question, or is that rhetorical?
No, I'm really curious. I'm hoping it wasn't, but no, I know. I fear it is. Yeah, I fear it is.
Well, throughout history, right, there's a rise and fall of civilizations. You tell me, do you think we're on the rise or on the fall?
Been falling for a while, yeah. For the past 10 years ish or more, 15. I think my theory is that it all started in the late 60s, and it's all coming to a head now. All the, like what I mentioned before, critical theories, this is a derivative of postmodernism and some of the other stuff that started in the late 60s to 70s. So now it's in fashion in a lot of academia, and it might take a while before we're out of it, because it just a lot of people are really into it. So,
well, I feel like things are a pendulum, and they swing and they swing and they swing, but eventually they tend to come back to the center.
You think? The Roman Empire didn't fall back to the center.
I know. That's a whole nother, that's the rise and fall of a civilization. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know, for US, what's the best period? I'll put you on the spot. What's the best period in US?
Well, in my lifetime, or just in US in general?
Both. Let's say both.
Oh man. Well, I'm a product of the 80s, so I really loved being a young person in the 80s. Was wonderful. I can't imagine being in my 20s, I was in my teens and my 20s in the 80s. I can't imagine being a teenager or in my 20s today with social media. The amount of pressure, and just the way in which you're constantly being watched, and everything is so outwardly facing. There's so little look inward. People don't necessarily have any introspection. Well, not any, but they don't have as much introspection as we tended to have back then. Everything is about what I look like. What is this gonna? When you go on a vacation now, everyone cares more about what's their Instagram shot than actually looking at the site and learning about its history and why it's significant and why it's important. The first thing everybody thinks about is, how is this going to look on my Instagram? Where am I going to get the best Instagram shot? Not why is this significant? Why is this important? What can I learn from being here? Those things are getting lost. It's all about how do I look? How is this going to make me look?
The image. It's all about the image.
Yeah.
Even I saw that even in sports, there's a young player plays for Miami Heat, and he had a great first season. And then his second season, he was already trying on social media to become a star, even before he's made a career. Like he had an okay season, and now his second season dipped because he wants to become more, somebody already on social media. He is somebody already by playing, but he wants to cash in already, and it's, I don't know, it's yeah, what I think, hopefully it's not the decline. Hopefully the West will rise again, but it's tough. It's tough. It's, what do you think? Okay, let's end on a positive note. How do we bring the West back? How what's the sign of hope? Do you see any hope? Like, do you see a student that's reading a lot and you're like, yeah, this is the hope for the future?
Yeah, I mean,
Mm,
I do see young people who are very um, ambitious and enthusiastic and very aware and socially conscious, and I think that's great.
mm,
I like to see young people who are active in their communities and really care about what's happening in the world and happening in society. And there are young people who are doing that. So I feel like that's very inspiring. But I also see the same number of young people who the bikini shot on Instagram is like their whole Instagram is just bikini shots. Really? That's the thing that you care about in the world right now is how you look, how you're going to look in your bikini on Instagram. Even when I was a young person and I had a bikini body, I wouldn't have put a bikini body on Instagram. My mind wasn't in that place. I cared more about what could I learn today.
yeah,
I'm a
but
bookworm. I've always been a bookworm.
but you weren't born in 2003, so it's a different upbringing, I guess. Very
I
different.
guess. I don't know.
Mm.
That's why I said I'm glad I was raised when I was raised because, it allowed me to prioritize different things, I guess.
So you're saying, just like in that movie Fiddler on the Roof, we need some tradition, some traditional values.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that all traditional values need to be, put for moved
Sure,
forward.
sure, sure.
I like to think that men and women could have an equal footing. I don't want to go back to the day where, I had to wear a dress and a high length collar and,
Sure,
you
sure.
know,
Yeah. But some
I
things
don't
were
know.
obviously good for,
Yeah, but
yeah.
I admire the suffragettes. I glad I have the right to vote. I don't want to go back to necessarily
Yeah,
those
yeah, I'm
times.
not saying that, but they yeah, obviously. For me, okay, you didn't say what was the best period in history though in America, like overall.
Oh man, there's a lot of time periods that I really like, but I feel like I really liked the Roaring Twenties.
Mm.
Um,
Oh yeah, that's a
Even
good
though
choice.
prohibition, but I've done a lot of research about prohibition, but people were actually drinking more during prohibition than
Yep.
prior to that. But as far as arts and culture, that was an absolutely magnificent time in our country for music and literature and the arts. And um, I really like that period of time. Um, as
Mm.
far as flourishing art scene and cultures, I think the 20s, 30s, even into the 40s, I really like, there's a lot of things I like about the arts and music and culture. And
Well, by the way, did you happen to know when was the year that Tokyo wrote Democracy in America? Must have been 18 something. Because he seemed to be very impressed with the American people in general, and yeah, I feel that period maybe the going to the West, where the West there was nothing in the West. I think I would love that period, just riding on horses. But also, I feel like the, after the end of World War II until 1965, that period about 20 years, I think that was awesome.
so there's a period of time, I live in Arizona, right?
Mm,
So the West, literally the Wild
yeah.
West, it still is in many ways. Um, the history here, as far as that period of time, like just post Civil War to the 1890s, is incredible. Like all the people coming west, and especially the old mining towns. I absolutely love going to the old mining towns, and just seeing that history and culture is phenomenal to me. It's one of my favorite times in American history as far as historical, the history of the country, and just being immersed in a historical period. I love, yeah, post Civil War, late 1860s to the 1890s. That westward expansion was a really interesting time period.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. I think we had a really good discussion. Do you think do you want any last words before we part ways?
No, thank you so much for having me as a guest. It's been an interesting conversation. We touched on a lot of different topics.
Yeah. Yeah, very glad to have you on the podcast. Thank you for being on. And thank you everybody for listening and watching the podcast.